Welcome back to the Drummer Mindset Podcast. I'm Joel Pereira. I'm excited to release my conversation with Logan Jayne today. Logan's another Asheville-born ripper on the drums. He's been playing live in this area for about 10 years now. You can see him and hear him with the Chilltonics and also Magenta Sunshine, who's coming out with a new album very soon. So this is a great conversation with Logan. Enjoy. I can't get over the number of amazing drummers there are in this town.
There are so many, yeah. And somehow there's not enough.
Is that right?
There's not enough.
Not enough people on the call list. Like, is it like you?
It can be a little desolate.
People calling you a lot, or what is that?
Yes, like? and all the badasses in town, I get called a lot, and there's it's good. It's a good problem to have when there's like more work than personnel.
Right. Yeah.
That there's a bunch of factors. Some of them being that and not to get too dark right away, but there's been some really badass drummers pass away in Asheville recently. Joey K being the most recent, but also Sean Mason died of an overdose a couple years ago. And that's the most immediate thing. Like, oh, they're gone. They're not like gifting the world actively with their music anymore.
Right.
And also, other factors that aren't as dark as that, or there's more businesses popping up, there's more venues, there's more musicians moving here.
Yeah. So
there's an increasing demand for drummers, I'd say. I don't think that's exclusive to Asheville either.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems like there's tons of gigs. Like it's always frustrating. Like it's kind of a dilemma, but a good dilemma, It's like, who do I go see now,
Yeah, option paralysis.
Exactly. Yeah, so how do you go about choosing which gigs you'll take or whatever?
Yeah, so there's the morality aspect of like, okay, I got this gig first,
right?
So I'm gonna honor it,
right?
That's what I try to do all the time. If it is a scenario where I get a gig and it's like good pay, but then I have an original project hit me up like, hey, we got this, this offer to play here on this date. Are you booked? And if I'm booked, then it's always a bit of a moral dilemma that I have.
Right.
But I try not to screw anyone over. So if I do like back out of a gig or something that's like like a wedding, for instance,
right, to
play a Chilltonic show, for instance, or a Magenta Sunshine show, then I try to just have enough time, enough lead up time to, find another drummer or give the band enough time to find another.
So that's so you have a list of drummers that you call on to try to cover where you need to. Is that common?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much anyone that's good, I try to just reach out to them first before if I'm in a scenario like that, I try to like figure it out initially before I back out of a gig.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't make that a regular practice. I've only had to do that a couple times.
Right.
Knock on wood.
Mm-hmm. But so you grew up here, so you've been playing here for a long time, right?
Yes. I started playing with. I was in a band in high school called the Doctor Van.
Okay.
And shortly after that, I started playing with a band called Lyric. When I was 16, 17, I started as a fill-in drummer for them. And they absolutely taught me and still teach me more about playing music than any any band experience or like music school experience I've had. Those are some of the realest motherfuckers on the scene. And they totally got on my ass when I was a kid.
Okay.
Just about timing and dynamics and
Uh-huh.
staying in the moment and making the music happen no matter what. I got that from a really young age. And to have that funk and R&B discipline
Yeah.
from that age, I'm very grateful for that because it's led me where I am now, and I am lucky to have been a part of something and still be a part of something that aligns with my, creative desires and stylistic desires.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think you've got several styles in pocket, right? Like, were you in jazz band and stuff when you were in high school as well? Or
In high school, yeah, I pretended to know what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
And I also pretended to know what I was doing when I was in big band in college.
That's a big part of it, right? Like,
yeah.
just kind of
I
saying,
mean,
yeah, I
always.
can do that, right? And then
Pretty
just
much in
figuring
any
it out.
scenario, there's a degree of like, assuming that you know what you're doing, but also it's like a paradox though, because I feel like the more that I just accept that I don't know anything,
Yeah.
the better I do. Pretty much in music and in life. But I'm not the first person to think that.
Sure. But it's still, that lesson often is hard won for a lot of folks, trying to get to some understanding of it, trying to, get enough knowledge to feel like you can internalize it and you feel like you got it. But then just to be, find humility in different ways.
Yeah. It's like the more knowledge you gain, the more you know that you don't know.
Right. That expertise level.
Something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's true. Yeah.
Not that I would call myself an expert.
Well, you've been doing it for how long?
I've been playing drums professionally, I guess you could say, for a decade now, which is not that long, but it's a considerable amount of time. And it is the only thing that I do. I mean, I pay my bills with music.
You put in
somehow.
your 10,000 hours a while ago.
Yeah, my first 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
It might be like 10,000 hours of playing, but then there's also the 10,000 hours of traveling in a van, or the 10,000 hours of dealing with, alcoholics, or the 10,000 hours of just developing people skills, and the 10,000 hours of doing that thing that we hate, which is, schmoozing with music industry people.
Yeah.
Which can be a really weird.
What's your industry experience like?
It's a good question. Mostly positive, although, I don't have to deal with, there's a lot of stuff I don't have to deal with directly. I haven't necessarily actively booked my own shows a whole lot. I mean, I've taken the band leader role a few times. I actually just played at the One Stop with this project I've been kind of manifesting with my friend, called Sex with Nature. It was kind of a last minute throw together. So we played a bunch of covers.
Okay.
But it was a blast. We had Jake Wolf on bass,
and
Brennan Dugan was also playing bass and playing guitar. Though I haven't taken the band leader role enough times to deal with shady business people.
Right.
That many times, so I'm not like that jaded on the booking or band leading role, but I have gotten a taste of that. You'd be surprised how shady agents and bookers and venue owners can be.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Wild West out there.
Yeah.
And then just to take it further, I also come from a privileged position because I'm a male in a male-dominated industry, and I literally cannot imagine I can only imagine what it's like to be, a woman in the industry. And that comes with a whole other list of challenges, so it's hard out there.
Yeah.
And really what I found is the community support in supporting each other and just standing by each other is the best way to keep going. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, artists have to support other artists.
Yeah.
Because we only artists understand an artist's perspective. I
Right.
think.
Yeah, it's difficult to have to switch like wear different hats, right? Like go from artist, and at what point are you also entrepreneur?
I can't decide if I want to wear a beanie or a bandana.
Exactly. That's right. There's a lot of hat options. You got a good hat collection. But yeah, I mean, it's like when you go from artist, performer to, okay, business, and how that goes,
Yeah, it can be a lot to change that mindset, because I really just want to show up, set up, chill out a little bit before we hit, and then hit it and not deal with anything else. And that's very idealistic,
Right.
but it's not always you can't always do that. That's you gotta figure out at some point in this business or industry, you have to figure out how to be personable.
Yeah.
And how to talk to people and just get along with people, even if you don't really care for them that much.
Right.
Sometimes you have to play with people who you don't really align with personally.
Right.
It can be a really powerful and beautiful experience, I think, to play music with someone that you might not really get along with that well.
Right.
Because it goes to show that music is ultimately the greatest neutralizer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way.
And if you can unify for an hour and a half on the stage, if you can be best friends for or however long your set is, then at least you have that time.
There's something,
you know.
right? Yeah, yeah. It's just another dimension to someone too, that you can kind of find some common ground.
Yeah.
At least agree where the one is, right? Like
Absolutely.
Yeah, that business piece. I always think about like, a lot of the band leaders from like the 60s and 70s and on, just like how like rabid they could be, just pit bullish, right? Like there's so I grew up in Augusta, and there was a time like James Brown is from there, and he would pull a lot from the community for his players, like especially towards the end. So he just pulled this dude, Keith Jenkins from Augusta, like this, just this kid essentially, and was like, "You're gonna be my guitarist," But he was telling a story, and this is like the era of like, I think it was like Lollapalooza or something they played, and he was old school, and they were like, "All right, it's our turn to go out." He's like, "I'm not going out. We haven't been paid," and it was just like he was running it just like the clubs, he always grew up doing. He was that kind of businessman, staunch, just like, no, this is how it goes. You don't get this until this happens, and it's like they just saw the anxiety going up because it was like they were getting to be late going out, which was not common, and I think for him. And so then finally they gave him the money and he went out, but it was just like holding on to those boundaries is so critical, I think.
Yeah.
Because he had been burned so many times, you can imagine, right? Like growing up.
Boundaries is I would say a positive buzzword. That's maybe a word we should keep talking about.
Yeah.
In society.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. And how does that apply for you?
Professionally, it applies. I mean, I guess in all sorts of ways. Just like if I'm going into a professional endeavor with a group of people, a group of musicians, I think there should just be the understanding that like we're all here to respect each other's time,
right,
and backgrounds, and we're all here to represent ourselves too, individually and together. So, no one's perfect. I make mistakes every day. Everyone makes mistakes. but the mission, right, is to just keep gaining awareness of yourself and your actions, and to have grace with yourself too and other people at the same time. But I think ultimately, professionally, like if you respect yourself, then ultimately I think you will find likely lots of groups of people that respect themselves enough in the same way to also outwardly respect you and your time.
Mm-hmm. Is there like, can you give me like a specific idea or story of like when that's happened? Like as far as like when you see someone that respects themselves in the way that you respect yourself, like is there a certain act that they do, some kind of behavior where it's like you can tell?
Well, if they're a good listener, first of all, I would say that music is exclusively listening.
Okay.
And I feel like a good listener on stage is also a good listener off the stage, and I think they are mutually exclusive. Maybe not like 100%. That's a very like absolute thing I just said.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause sometimes I have experienced on rare occasions where someone is just, and I'm sure I've been this way too, but someone is a terrible listener off the stage, but on the stage it's like they're totally engaged and they're present, which can be a little frustrating, I'm sure. But the musicians I jive with the most, I feel like, are good listeners on and off the stage with a capital L. Mm-hmm. Listen. Mm-hmm. That supports the idea of making the music happen no matter what, being in the moment and listening. Like, what does this sound like right now?
Yeah. What
does this person sound like? How does this person's fingernails sound against the guitar strings? How detailed can you really listen to someone's sound, and how can you complement their sound the best? It's kind of the rhetorical question on the stage. And then off the stage, to what capacity can this person listen to me and be receptive and respond? And then to what capacity can I also match that?
Yeah. I just started reading this book called The Audience of One. And so it's all about like creativity and like how we should all begin to create again, like in ways that we're not like looking to publish or put out in the world or anything, but just to kind of, just for our mental health and also just, for the sake of it. But in it, they say listening is creative, which has been something I've been thinking about a lot. Like I agree with it and I want to agree with it, but I'm not sure that I fully grasp what it means. I can see it as an intermediary, right? Like that's pretty easy to understand. It's like, as I listen, I'm creating an idea maybe, or a response to that. But yeah, I don't know.
Repetition is the key to actualizing. That is a bastardized quote from somebody that I don't even remember, but I recall at one point someone telling me like repetition is the key to actualizing an idea. Mm-hmm. So then within that repetition, you've got to be super patient. Mm-hmm. And also, content enough to keep repeating yourself. And that's a challenge. I mean, that's the name of the game. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like listening is a part of that? Like maybe the beginning of repetition is kind of creating this model. Like say you're just listening to some groove or a guitarist do, some lick or riff or whatever. And like you're listening and it's already starting to create that repetition. Like you're kind of remodeling it in your head or something and figuring out like how you're going to play it. And then when you actually lay sticks on the kit or whatever, like that is again just another iteration of your repetition beginning there.
Yeah. So the idea is formulating before it's actually an idea.
Yeah, like you've already kind of gone through the scenario in your head and did it like just mentally before you actually jump in.
Yeah, and maybe ideally I'm not even thinking about it in my head, and it's just a bodily instinct. I think I play the best when I'm not thinking at all. I feel like, not to get too woo-woo or anything, but I feel like music is always there. It's always playing. And when musicians play, they become channels for that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can tell in a room when this spirit that people feel, spirit of music, you can tell when that does come through. And it's not always right away. Sometimes it's right away. But you can usually tell when it happens, when everyone just kind of lets go at once. And I think a demarcation of someone's experience in doing said thing that I'm talking about is how long they can keep that moment flowing. Sometimes it's the whole evening. Sometimes it's, just for the whole song.
Right. Sometimes
it's just for 2 measures. And I think that feeling freaks people out if they don't know what it feels like. And this feeling that I'm talking about, I've heard it described as, the feeling of enlightenment. There's a term, I'm not bilingual or a Spanish speaker, but there's a term in Spanish, el duende, and I've come to understand it is as the song is playing itself, and I'm just holding this pair of sticks, and my friend is just holding this piece of wood with metal strings on it, and the thing is just happening, and we're not thinking about it. That's not like the exact definition of El Duende, but in a musical application, the spirit of being evoked is coming through and is musically being expressed.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
Yeah. I love that idea. I love the way that you presented that, because like I've been thinking about things more in terms of like, for a while now, like the muses or just flow, like all these different things that kind of describe like this meditative state where you are just kind of the observer and seeing things unfold as they go. And then what you also just like kind of triggered in my head was this thought too of like, I just watched this documentary about electronic music and these artists that use like different modular synthesizers and stuff. And they talk about it like having everything, all the tones and all the frequencies are all in this machine. And what they were drawing the difference between that and like playing like more specific instruments, because they were saying like it's all in there and you're just sculpting it as it comes out. But the way you describe it, it's like, yeah, it's almost like there's this piece of like it's there, or you like you're carving, building a violin, you just whittle away everything that doesn't look like a violin or whatever, but and what you're talking about is there's this channel that you just kind of tap into when you've put in enough time and also learn to let go of all that at the same time.
Yeah, believing in it,
right, that it's something higher. It's funny, like because you like prefaced by saying I don't, not to get all woo, right? And it's like, I don't understand, like so many of us say it, but when you're playing drums or you're playing music at all, like I don't understand how you can't just go there. You know what I mean?
I don't really understand it either. I try to be the most rationally spiritual that I can. And sometimes that's too spiritual for people. I don't know. But I do experience music as a spirit, as an entity, as an energy, for sure.
Have you always felt that way as long as you've been playing? Or?
There's my grandfather was at one point in time, he wasn't my biological grandfather, but he was my grandfather by proxy and by nurture, not by nature, but by nurture. Right. And he at one point played in the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
What did he play?
Also piano.
Okay.
And he also played for President Eisenhower on multiple occasions in the White House.
Wow. Just
a savant on the piano. And I never gave a shit about it. I was always watching his drummer. He had a jazz trio. and I can't even remember the drummer's name. But there's a picture of me. I should show you, but I don't know where my phone is.
I think, did you leave it over here on the kit?
Oh, I might have.
But,
Well, I'll show you at some point. But there's
cool.
a picture of me just staring at the drummer, looking past my grandfather on the piano.
You were hooked. And was that before you had ever played?
That was before I played. I actually started on guitar when I was 5.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't really love it. I mean, I liked it all right.
Right.
But I wasn't totally taken by it. And then some number of years later, I think I was around the age of 10 or 11, I was at a friend's house and we were playing Rock Band. And it was right when they released like the drum pads. Like they didn't exclusively have the guitar controller or the microphone.
Yeah.
And I just tried that, and I knew it. I knew that I was like supposed to play the drums, and it was a video game.
Yeah.
So that really
that
shows
me so much.
that I'm giving away my age right now.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what I'm finding, like whatever age you are, like I mean, I remember those times, but there's a lot of wisdom that's still coming through, and I think the conversation is just like the music, like it's just us. It's an experiment of trying to like pull out ideas on where we match, you know, and it doesn't matter the age. You know, like I had just interviewed my 7-year-old, and she like blew me away with like thoughts about how she plays the drums. You know, like it just, if you're open to it, it does not matter the age that it comes from. You know, like there's just, I believe in the concept of like forgotten knowledge, and there's like wisdom that we, you know, it seems to me like there's observation and wisdom that we're kind of born with, or that we tune
cellular
into
knowledge.
Quick.
For sure.
And you got to listen to everyone. And if you're not, then there's some block there.
My mom always says adults ruin children.
It's so true in a lot of ways. It's so true. Yeah.
So I'm trying to just stay a kid.
Yeah.
In the ways that
that openness of play, you know, and just experimentation is something that I think, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what music allows you to do, is to remember what being a kid is like. You know?
Yeah, agreed. I think all aspects of creativity,
for sure,
kind of allow us to kind of tap into that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that creating and I mean that is, I mean scientifically the essence of the universe is creating. I mean, we are animals and we create. We're humans, but we're, you know, fundamentally we're animals, and we have a biological urge to create more of us, obviously.
Right.
Or there wouldn't be 7 billion of us.
Right.
And that creative energy obviously gets expressed in multitudes of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating how music is this giant umbrella, though, like for all cultures and populations of people, that it's this thing that it does unify people, and I think that is something to always remember. I mean, because we have a very limited amount of time here. I can't prove that reincarnation is real. It might be real, but if it is real, I'm not going to remember this interview when I come back, so I might as well do what I fucking want to do with my life. Right. And do my best to, you know, be a good person.
Mm-hmm. Was your family pretty supportive of like
extremely? Yeah.
It's like when you made the decision, like I'm all in for music.
Well, they've always been really into, for me, like what I'm into. At one point, I was really into NASCAR when I was really young, and I thought I was gonna be a race car driver. And I probably could have. I think that I probably still could. I really, I'm not like a NASCAR fan anymore, but at one time I was really passionate about that. And they would, you know, take me to races and stuff like that. And at one point I was into tap dancing when I was really young, just figuring it out, you know, and they were like, all right, well, join this tap regiment.
Okay.
And then for I'm kind of jumping timelines here, but
Sorry.
then when I got to high school, I got introduced to drumline and marching band, and then
What was that
I ended up,
introduction? Like, how did you first see it? Like at school?
yeah, so I had been playing drums and studying with Joey K, R.I.P., for a couple of years, and I got to high school, and I saw the marching drums just set up in a very militaristic fashion. I had never really seen a drum line prior to that. So my first year in marching band, I was in the front ensemble, but I was always, then I got really fixated on the drum line, and that's when I started studying, marching rudiments, and I ended up marching 2 seasons of drum corps and marching at Western Carolina University on the gold drum line, which is like their highest one. I ended up putting so many hours into the marching arts, and that if you want to do one thing to a young drummer for their hands, it's to get them involved in marching band to some capacity. I might have done a little bit too much of it.
Really? What do you mean?
It almost ruined it for me, I think. I just did so many consecutive seasons, and I was finally like, you know what? This is not gonna. I don't want to be a drumline instructor,
Right?
Exclusively,
Right.
So, why else am I pursuing this to this capacity? So my last year of college, I actually quit the drumline, which really upset the instructor. Shout out to Matt Henley if you ever watch this. But and then from there, I was like, I'm gonna deep dive back into drum set. I never quit playing drum set, but doing all the marching band stuff, I certainly wasn't getting the hours in to playing the kit that I wanted to. Not to say that I wasted my time, but it's very militaristic, the marching band stuff. Very regimented, very anxiety inducing.
Yeah, I've heard about
Not
marching
fun
band
at all.
baggage that people come away with sometimes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much I've pretty much resolved all of that stuff internally. But it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I just think I did too much of it. I'm grateful that I did all of it, because I mean, my hands and my mental fortitude definitely benefited from it. Excuse me.
Where's the mental fortitude coming? Just because of that militaristic perspective?
Yeah, just the repetition and the
perfection of
the constant feedback of you played this one note too high, and you also didn't hit your drill dot.
Yeah.
25 push-ups.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Militaristic.
And that wasn't that didn't really happen in high school and college, but when I did drum corps, which if you are not familiar, or anyone's not familiar with that, that's a non-scholastic, highly competitive brass and percussion version of marching band.
Okay. And
you compete nationally.
Okay.
You go on tour with whichever drum corps you get contracted with. And that you sign, a 15-page contract that basically says we can treat you like garbage, and you're paying us to do it. So buckle up or get out of here. Yeah. Basically is what, and you're responsible for your own death if that occurs.
Okay. They really.
No, I'm not kidding. I signed a
it.
performance contract that had a section that said, if you die, it is not our obligation. So.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a different feel altogether.
There's a lot of controversy around drum corps too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty problematic age group, because you have people that are 14 and 15, and then you have people that are aging out that are like 20, 22, 21, 22. And that by itself is one thing, but then there's been all kinds of just allegations and really unfortunate stories of harassment and assault, and just really just, it's not a scene that I care to really affiliate with anymore.
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with drunk people in a bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. You had mentioned,
Not to leave a bad taste about it. I mean, I did benefit a lot from that environment, and still have a lot of friendships and relationships with people that I met during that time. But
yeah. There's a paradox there, right?
Yeah.
You had mentioned your drum teacher, Joey K. Is that something you feel like talking about?
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm gonna start bawling. I might.
It's all good, man. I mean, you don't even have to talk about it.
I also may not. Sometimes I can compartmentalize pretty well.
Right on. Yeah.
But you got the Puffs Plus lotion.
That's it,
so
man.
At least I know that I'm not gonna leave dried out.
That's right. It's there. But
I met Joey K. Joseph Katkowski. He never told people his last name because it was Katkowski. How do you spell that, right? I met Joey K when I was 12 years old. He was working at the Music Center in River Ridge, which is now Music and Arts and owned by Guitar Center.
Oh, is that right?
But I digress. It used to be a really badass music store. And I wish I could like draw this out or have like actors recreate this moment, because it was like a comic book. But I walked in with my dad. I had just gotten my first drum kit, and I was playing all the time, and my technique was terrible, so I was breaking tips, like the tips of sticks, just constantly. And I walked in, and he was at the counter, and he was looking down, messing with this guitar pedal. I think he was like fixing a wire inside of it or something, just kind of like grunting to himself with a screwdriver, like, And I walked up to him, and I was like, "Hey, man, I just started playing drums. I really like it. I want to try out some nylon drumsticks, some nylon tips, and was curious if you have any recommendations." And Joey, still looking down at this guitar pedal, goes, "Listen, kid, you don't need that bullshit. All you need is your drumsticks and your balls." And right when he said that, he looked up at me, and I instantly started taking drum lessons with him. Like, I mean, it was the next week, the next Monday, and then every Monday after school, because I had just started high school at that point, or right before that. Every Monday I had a drum lesson with him, and then they got more spaced out. But Joey was constant in my life. I saw him all the time. He would actually take me to his gigs and show me how to load in my gear and set up and correspond with venue owners, and I witnessed his relationships with his bandmates and his friends and all kinds of people in his life.
What was the band he was in? Was that something that was like regular?
Well, when I met him, he was playing with Jim Arundel and the Cheap Suits, and The Business, which they kind of have like a wedding a wedding business, for lack of a better term, but they also were playing as, Jim Arundel and The Business, like out on town. They did all kinds of different shows. They did like a Bob Marley tribute at one point. They did like just all kinds of musical outing. Joey was one of those chameleon players. He played with Rational Discourse at one point, and this is just local stuff. If you go back in time when he was more my age, he was living in Pasadena, California, and he was playing with a band called The Big Pill. and they played at a club called McMurphy's every Monday night for just some consecutive amount of years, but they just got so tight. I mean, they were just rock stars. All of those guys are still killing it in the LA area. Joey moved here to get clean, though.
Gotcha.
And he he was playing with Pink actually for a brief period of time.
Okay.
And I have a journal actually that I dug out of his trash can. And there's entries in there about rehearsing with Pink, and he's just kind of venting to himself about the recording engineer getting on his ass about something, yeah, I mean, he touched a lot of people. And sometimes he rubbed people the wrong way. But Joey, his musical influence and his love for people and his capacity to care about the people around him and the music being made around him, it made everyone better. Without naming any names, I know of people that worked with Joey that he would butt heads with for whatever reason, But I know that those people, and I know that Joey, at the end of the day, definitely love and respect each other, no matter what kind of headbutting was happening. So he always had that undercurrent of a greater mission, this thing that he was making with other people, this music spirit that he was summoning with people. He always made sure that was happening, no matter what. He was a guy that just made it happen.
It's amazing to be able to have mentors like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not a given.
It's not a given at all. I'm really blessed to have known him. And, like I was saying, it started as a teacher-student dynamic, and it quickly formulated into just for lack of a better term, kind of a ride or die, like friendship. I wasn't necessarily seeing him every day, but when we did hang out, we would get into all kinds of things. Like I helped him do a couple of songs on one of his records, like just assist engineering. Like we would like brainstorm mixing ideas, and he has helped me mix a bunch of projects that I've recorded with, and he's given me all kinds of input. I remember he came to one of my gigs one time, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, and he called me the next day. He was like, "Man, you sound excellent. Like nothing, I can't even say anything, but your hi-hats are too low. You look like you got handcuffs on." It's like, damn, that's the level of detail and level of care that he.
But he didn't make you do push-ups, though.
No, he wasn't an asshole at all. No, he had some marching background too, and you could tell by the way he played. He was always he wouldn't sugarcoat, and at the same time he was very direct and efficient with the way that he communicated.
Yeah,
and I absorbed that. I mean, if you know someone from ages 12 to 26 and you look up to them like they're your, uncle or your older brother, you're certainly going to absorb their personality.
Yeah.
And people, like, I keep hearing this, and I'm not prompting it. People just keep saying it, like, man, you sound like him and yourself. Like, you sound like he's alive now within you. And that's what happens when people die, is they only live through how they have influenced other people.
Right.
And I don't know. I would label myself as a sensitive individual, and I kind of feel like he's sitting here right now. I mean, this is his coffee mug.
Okay.
That I also took from his house when we went and packed everything up. Not that this coffee mug is conjuring his spirit. I think it's more just the memory and the energy of him. And
You play his drums too, though, right?
I play his drums, and that is yeah, I'm not even sure what to say next. There's certainly plenty that I could say about him.
That directness is something that I've come to like really appreciate and try to practice more and more. I feel like, especially maybe it's a cultural thing too, like just kind of growing up in the South, it's something that's kind of avoided, right? Like you got to beat around the bush before you like jump right in.
Yeah.
I can understand like the small talk that sometimes happens, you know, it can be important. Kind of like checking in with where someone is, like checking their temperature, seeing what's up, like where do you align? Okay. And then kind of, you know, at that point though, it's nice and it's helpful to clearly know what someone's thinking. It's like a gift, right? Like where you're not having to like second guess things. There's no vagueness to what a suggestion is or anything like that. But it seems like it doesn't always land so well when someone comes from like California or up north or whatever. Do you think that was kind of some of the
That's
rubbing
certainly
the wrong way?
Certainly part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how I personally became so crass.
Oh, okay.
But I think if I were to ponder why, I think a lot of it has to do with Joey, and a lot of it has to do with my mother. Because they are alike in that way where they didn't sugarcoat at all. My mom does not sugarcoat anything. And Joey certainly did not. My dad doesn't either, but he is a lot more reserved than my mother is. I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
It's interesting. I still run into this sometimes where I mean, I can just get really passionate about an idea, and every now and then it comes across in this way like I'm harping on somebody in like a rehearsal setting or something. And I don't know, I try to check myself and my delivery, and it doesn't always get filtered out the way that I necessarily like to, but I also just try not to filter, because I feel like the more I try to filter, the more that I offend or upset.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you're going to upset people in your life, right? I might as well just speak my truth. And
right.
If someone gets upset because I'm telling them they're rushing the end of a 8-bar phrase every single time we play it, then fuck it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if at the end of the day, like you're trying to, especially creating something with somebody, like that's what you're there for. It's interesting how feedback is something that I find interesting. Yeah, we can play, like we can create for an audience of one, for sure, absolutely. But also, like, music is communication. It's like one of the original pieces of communication. You consider the voice and hitting a rock against another rock. It's some form of communication, and especially if you're making music and your performance at all is a part of it. Like feedback is what we all really crave. It might not be directly from an individual, and we might not care about what a critic says or these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But definitely when you're on stage with someone, or you're in the studio with someone, or you're just in a practice space and you're like trying to come up with an idea together, like that direct kind of communication is a gift, I feel like if otherwise it can be wasting time, and otherwise resentment builds. Like say you don't say anything about that, rushing at the end of the 8-bar phrase or whatever. It's just like, it's going to boil inside of you. Right. So it's that boundary piece again. It's just like, here, we're trying to align our tastes right now. And this is what I'm hearing. You might not be hearing it, but that's why we're playing together. We're friends, hopefully.
That's why metronomes exist.
Yeah.
Joey would say, God, metronome, everything else.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever you interpret God
Does
as.
not lie. Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because no one has perfect time. I really strive to not criticize. I strive to give critical feedback when I think there is potential for it to be received.
Right.
I told one of my friends recently who is stylistically a wonderful guitar player and musically, I mean, one of the best musicians I know. Their voice is amazing. But I told them you would be 20 times better if you just regimented a little bit and practiced this. I just handed them this exercise that Joey gave me, actually, called the black box. You can play it on a drum pad or you can play it on guitar. There's two different versions of it. It's a pattern of, it's basically like a sequence of check patterns of 16th notes.
Okay.
But anyways, I literally just said you would be 20 times better if you just got your timing in order.
Okay.
And even if you didn't learn any other vocabulary on the guitar for the rest of your life, you have enough of it to express, infinitely while you're alive on this planet. Just get your timing together.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not perfect. Like my ego has gotten in the way at times.
Like when?
I think definitely when I was younger. Sometimes now, but now I'm way better at recognizing after the fact when it has gotten in the way.
Yeah.
And that leads me to something I wanted to say about the ego, which is a very important thing, I think, to talk about and try to understand. A lot of people have this narrative, and it's a really common narrative, of like, fuck the ego, like,
Right.
get rid of it. It's evil. It's bad. Maybe this is controversial, and maybe some people would say I have a giant ego for saying this, but I think the ego is important. You need your self-image to survive in this world. Otherwise, it's just going to chew you up.
Yeah.
People are going to take advantage of you, and that's just, honestly, just nature. If you have no self-respect, or if you have zero pride, well, good luck. I mean, that's awesome, but
You're
it's
absolutely
not
right.
a perfect world. I think the skill to maybe talk about, or maybe how the ego can be useful to people is, like the question you can ask yourself is how well can I set aside my ego?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's really when you collaborate the best, and that's when you can take criticism and take things with a grain of salt, is when you can recognize your ego and not leave it behind, but at least set it aside so that, you can be open to experiencing something in a way that is not your initial lens of understanding it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like, so many people talk about ego death, and it's like, wait a second, like, what are you going to be left with? And I think really where it started getting such a bad rap is like, if you have the ego and the id, right? It's two different things. The ego protects the id, but at some point, and usually it's trauma related, and someone becomes withdrawn, or they're neglected or abandoned, then the ego is all a child has to protect them. And then it overshadows and it becomes too big to manage.
Wow.
And so that's the point where learning to let go of it a little bit more, or shrink it, or I love the way you're putting it too, because it's it's bracketing, it's not like getting rid of it, but it's like this, it's not the time right now,
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of times where the whole idea about, dissociative identity disorder come from, or multiple personalities, as it used to be called. It was like this creation of different characters, these different, entities that would protect
As a coping mechanism.
You need to have a healthy relationship with it and realize that it is helpful. It is what it very literally can keep you alive. Literally meaning it's still a theory, right? Like these are all just efforts and experiments to kind of, understand our human nature, right? So
right.
there's no fact with it, but the way that I understand it and the way that it's been theorized, it's definitely, there's a healthy aspect to it,
Yeah, I think so.
because you can't be all id.
I mean, dude, I will be the first to say it. I have a massive ego.
Okay.
I mean, I love playing music. I love the way that I play music for the most part. I mean, I am hard on myself too, which is part of the ego.
Right.
And I think the point is just constantly trying to get better at identifying with the ego, recognizing my ego, and being able to set it aside and still maybe understand and validate it, but also like setting aside so it doesn't get in the way of a musical interaction or a musical moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a constant like back and forth, I think. And I'm definitely not perfect at it, but I know that my ego is large. And I think that is okay to know that.
Yeah, I mean, insight in and of itself is like very healing to understand yourself in that way. Do you ever feel like it disallows you from listening to feedback from other people?
I don't think so. I mean, if someone has some shit to say to me, I usually take it and I'm like, all right, I'm going to chew on that. Like, even if if I do chew on it and I don't agree with it later on, then okay, at least I've thought about it.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you're being threatened when in retrospect there was no threat?
Oh, I felt like that before. Yeah.
But is that something that's like currently a part of daily life for you?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I feel threatened by bad drivers, and I feel threatened by, things that matter. At one point last year, there was a shootout right in front of my house. I feel more threatened by that than if someone doesn't want me to play a crazy drum fill at a certain part of a song. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just insight. And I think too, like that's the paradox again of being a musician or a performer, right? It's like there's this social anxiety that you have to put aside a lot of times. There's difficulty. You're playing with brand new people and you're showing up and you're doing it, right? Despite what a lot of folks might experience as cues of fear or rejection, like you're doing it anyway,
Just trying
and you're trusting your taste. Like that's always the thing, but also trying to like balance that of like listening to feedback too.
Yeah.
And assessing it and like knowing whether or not to take it to heart.
Yeah, and I'm not perfect at it. I don't think I don't necessarily strive to be the perfect anything.
Sure.
'Cause then there's nothing to work towards, or there's nothing to like.
Well, it's just futile because there's no perfection, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's just pointless.
But I also try to shut up until it's my turn to speak. I'm not the greatest at that either. But certainly better than I was when I was 16.
Sure. Sure.
And I feel like I am just getting started, like and I feel excitement from that.
Just getting started with what?
Just with music.
Uh-huh.
I don't plan on settling down at any point anytime soon.
What do
I
you
feel
mean by
like
settling down? Just like
getting complacent, I guess. I want to experience the world and traveling, and I've traveled a lot playing music, and it's only made me want to travel more. And I've gotten, let's see, I guess just a little bit over a decade of playing live, And I feel like that decade has only set me up to really begin my serious journey. And it's kind of eerie with the timing of Joey passing. But if there's any positive sentiment to come out of that, it's that, well, now I've got a fucking reason. And the reason is he's not here anymore. And not enough people knew how badass he was. And although he did have a number of students that he influenced greatly, I do happen to know that I was a pupil of his for the longest, and certainly knew him and his personality, even the darkest parts of it, really closely, So to continue, for the lack of a better term, his legacy, that's what I'm realizing now is really my mission, and he's not going to be here to criticize me or, give me any shit about it. And it's not the only thing I can do, but it's certainly a significant thing I can do is, carry on his legacy in whatever ways I can, not just playing drums, but just the way he was with people and the way he supported his community. He was, he would let you know if you were, messing something up, but he would show you how to get there. I mean, he was very diligent in my drum lessons, and he was just a very diligent person. If someone was seeking, a higher level of technique, or if someone was asking him for his advice and he opened his mouth, he knew what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
My dad called him Joe It All. Because he was a know-it-all, but when he was talking about something, you can bet your ass he knew what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think like 82% of the time I open my mouth, I know what I'm talking about. I'm working on that last 18%.
Yeah. So you're just getting started. Is it more of the same? Is that what you're looking forward to? Or like more of that travel, like you said, and more gigs, or?
I guess you could look at it as more of the same. As I continue on and as I continue to develop musical relationships with the people I've been playing with, and also meeting new people and developing new musical relationships, I mean, that I think always has a novelty to it. And I don't know, there was a point in time like last year where I was kind of like, I'm kind of jaded, but that had to do with other things and other just ways that I was existing and still am existing a little bit, just with routine and trying to figure out how to get my most optimal, schedule. But music, man, it always renews itself, and it always has for me.
Do you see it in cycles, or like has there, like, as you look back?
Sometimes, I mean, the easiest cycle to observe, I think, are the seasons, and with the fall and winter right around the corner here, I understand that now that I'm not, I'm not the youngest kid. I'm still a kid.
Right.
Now I understand seasonally what this time of year can bring, and that's like coming inward and beginning fresh ideas and like finding the childlike spirit again, so that when the spring and summer roll around, then those ideas get, just perpetually birthed into the universe and explode outward to whatever capacity that they do. I mean, that's what happens scientifically with the earth. There's more carbon dioxide and more, it's cold, the temperatures are colder, and then in the spring and summer, like, there's this lush outward burst of life. And creatively, I think that happens with people, especially with, I guess, creative types. The winter can get, lonely and desolate, but it's kind of a reminder to find that creative validation, I guess, within yourself.
How do you find it?
Yeah, I mean, good question.
Or how have you found it?
How have I found it? I've been more successful and less successful at different points, but finding it, I think, comes from not looking for it.
Yeah.
And letting it kind of find you. And I feel more rejuvenated when I spend quality time with people I care about, family and friends included in that. That always, I feel like, rolls back around and feeds my creative desire, or at least gives me the energy to fulfill my, creative desires, or, and if I didn't have the people that I have in my life, I don't think I would be as motivated or as inspired to be creatively inspired.
Yeah.
That's a little redundant, but
yeah, I mean, but again, it's like cycles too, right?
Yeah.
Like it all, like it's a source in so many ways. Like it's your family, and so it's where, like, yeah. As you're talking, man, I'm like going so far like woo that I've not in a long time. Just like thinking about
Awesome.
what you're saying, and like, so I've been thinking about the sound in the room and how, like, I want to treat the room sound and its travel through different temperatures and humidities. And sound travels farther in the cold. Right?
Okay.
So then I started thinking about, like, what you're saying is, like, you try not to like focus or find it, but you're just being open, like tuning in or just accepting the things. And it's almost like this is a time to just sit back and listen as a creative process. Scientifically, you can hear things from further distances, right?
In the cold.
In the cold. So if it's true, like on that spiritual level, or that concept of, like, withdrawing and just listening, as opposed to like emoting or like externalizing the ideas, like you're absorbing it, and you are tuned in, like you can get a different frequency than maybe you've not been able to pick up before. Because I had never, like, I mean, you think about the seasons and things like that, but you also, I think we oftentimes don't enough, like, give that credence. So in my practice, I would, there's a lot of seasonal affective disorder. And so much of the suffering comes from, I think, people trying to fight that fact. And not recognizing that it might be a time to just bundle up, let more carbon dioxide in the air. Maybe sleeping, like, is a part of that. Maybe it's that time of rest, right? And I feel like we because of our modern society, we feel like, no, we've got to be productive always. And we forget that there is a season, and it's like, it's this massive force on us that we forget, like, no, it's a good time to rest. Like, you don't have to feel guilty about not crushing it every day.
Right. Yeah.
But so many signs tell us to slow down anyway. If it's an icy road, like, maybe you don't need to go out, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, and since you can hear further in the cold, I mean, the stillness of the winter, if you can get more content with that stillness, I think that's when you can actually start to hear that thing that appears to be further away, maybe isn't,
Yeah.
If it were summer all the time, I would just probably dissolve in creative mania. I mean, I get very inspired late at night, and that is a diminishing return, I tell you what.
What do you do with it when it strikes you in the middle of the night?
Oh, I mean, I'll stay up all night, like tracking something or editing video, or next thing I know, it's 5 a.m. or 8 a.m. But I don't know, I've kind of accepted that those late night hours, that is the time for me to start on new ideas, and not be so pragmatic or logical about it.
When you say that, you mean like going
critical
to bed on time, or okay,
critical of myself or whatever's coming out. Like, most people are asleep, so I just feel like there might be some degree of like, there's just more, energy, I guess, that's not being utilized, like more brain power. If we're connected to some kind of hive mind, then there's more radio silence at those hours of night. So I feel like I can actually work and be alone.
right?
I don't know what it is. I don't know why those hours are the creative hours. But I try to just embrace it when it happens, and then I just know that, okay, I need to sleep.
Yeah.
But the challenge I have is like, I'll stay on that creative like snowball, and I can easily wear myself out.
Yeah.
Just with everything else that I'll have going on too. Like if I have something that's a work in progress, it's easier for me to find the motivation to stay up really late and work on it. It's not really so much like I have an initial idea. Like I usually have to like have a seeded idea already, and then I can really see it come to life once there's an initial idea, and I don't have to think about the start.
Yeah.
And that's whenever I had to like write papers in school, it was kind of that same thing. Like it's the first sentence or the first paragraph. I'm like, where do I? But if I start in the middle, I know exactly where it's going.
Yeah.
I like writing too. I don't do it enough, but I think obviously there's poetry and rap, and obviously lyrics are poetry. I don't know. I experience writing poetry and making music in a very similar. It feels the same. Poetry is more sporadic for me though. Like I can just randomly wake up at 4 a.m. and there's some kind of stanza in my head.
Yeah.
I'm working on interweaving my poetry writing with my lyric writing. I haven't quite made the bridge there.
Okay.
But
That's awesome.
I wouldn't call myself a practiced lyricist by any means. I have a bunch of incomplete songs.
Rick Rubin, in his book, The Creative Act, he said that all art is poetry. And he was just kind of drawing that definition of poetry as like almost because it's all beyond us, like it's all out of our conscious, or it's in our subconscious, or it's above it all, like it's outside of it altogether. Like you were saying, like we can act like a conduit for whatever comes through if we're listening enough, right? And creating something, and it's like you said, like the stanza will like just kind of come to you, and you'll just get it down.
But it doesn't, like, I don't know. I think there's times where it's just radio silence, and that's okay too. You don't always have to be creative. I think people put pressures on themselves to be creative, and that's a little counterintuitive. I think the best ideas just kind of happen. I feel like I perceive people having a great idea, whether it's vocally or like in the way that they said something rhythmically or the way they played something, and then they criticize themselves instantly.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's a lot, and I'm sure that I do that same thing. 100%. And I don't think there's any like what do you judge as a bad idea if someone hears it as good and you hear it as you're like, oh, I just messed up, I just made a mistake,
Right.
but someone else is like, wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
How quickly, the rhetorical question is like, how quickly can you become okay with your quote unquote mistake actually being a statement, a musical or an artistic, a poetic statement.
Yeah.
I mess up all the time.
Uh-huh.
And when I play like a note somewhere that I don't necessarily like, I try to just do it again in the next bar, just
Right.
to repeat myself. And that's worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
people still call me. So.
Yeah. How do you choose who you play with? And do you feel like there's a certain amount of gatekeeping that happens with that?
People in general in your life come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And if we're talking about playing music with people, I think it works the same way. I don't think anything is set in stone. I think bands come and go. There have been times where I am playing with a band and then time goes on and I'm not playing with that band as much, and then more time goes on and I end up playing more gigs with them later on. I mean,
Right.
sort of an ebb and flow, and the language and nature of music, I think, is greater than the human relationships that we gatekeep. I'm not really sure if this is beginning to answer your question or not, but yeah, I don't know. I think if you just like feel good in general around someone, that's kind of the fundamental, like, if you just jive on a human
Yeah.
level, that's kind of the most important part. Because someone can be just a total shredder, like destroy it. Every
Right.
note they play or every note they sing can be just the best thing you've ever heard. And they can be a total asshole off the stage, and it's no fun. That's not sustainable
Right.
for anybody.
Right.
I don't know. I just think experiencing everything and just trying to learn from every moment that you can. You figure out like who you want to be spending your time with. You figure out that discernment, because no one wants to play with total hacks. I don't really want to be the best one in the band ever. I mean, ideally, I guess in a very idealistic scenario, everyone's exactly the same skill level. The more that I consciously try to actively listen to my friends, no matter what they're talking about, but especially if they're talking about like a grievance or something they're suffering from, the more time I consciously give to the active listening, I feel like the better I am at playing music on stage. And I think that goes hand in hand, because you're just hearing each other. You're on stage and you're just there to hear each other. You're not there to recite a fucking song that you practiced for a year straight. Who cares?
Dude. That just I think you just helped me kind of make sense of the listening is creating thing. It's
Well, there you
like,
go.
it's like forming models, you know. It's like, I don't know. These words are always going to fall short of over such an abstract idea, but like it is like if it's making you better, just listening to your friends talk and being open and real about where they're at, and that makes you better on stage. If it enriches your experience on stage in that way,
Or enriches your just musical aptitude, you know? Because it's not you that you're bettering. It's like your conscious decision to hear this person.
yeah,
It's not like me being a better drummer. It's not like
yeah, it's just an engaged participant, right? Yeah, awesome.
and then you can really start to hear, like physically hear that someone isn't hearing you, and that is really fun. No, that's sarcasm.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, cool.
hear
Man.
hear your brother hear each other, or
Yeah.
or sister, or any gender identifying term. Yeah, listening, capital L. That's what Joey left me with. He was like, listen, just always.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you're playing, who you're playing with, who you're trying to impress.
There was one other question, technical question, kind of.
Okay.
Are you always counting?
Like not always. If something is in mixed meter, then I'll count through it the first few phrases just to ensure that I'm on it. I try to feel it as quickly as possible. It's all in 4/4 unless you're a nerd.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you got the downbeat, you got everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you all agree on where the one is, you're fine.
Yeah.
But if you're playing in time and then the guitar player rushes at the end, or I rush at the end, or whatever, then like there's gonna be a point of tension where it's like, okay, do we agree where this downbeat's about to happen, or do we not? Not to say that tempo changes can't be musical. They certainly can be. I'd rather it be intentional.
Right. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.